Hello, and welcome to Senior Perspectives, a show by and about elders living here in the beautiful north coast of California. Nice to have you with us. Remember that Senior Perspectives is brought to you in part by Redwood Coast Senior Center on Herald, next to Cotton Auditorium. Come on by for lunch, give us a buzz if you need a ride somewhere. If you're just looking for a stimulating conversation or a way to relax and enjoy yourself, definitely the place to meet us here on the coast. And of course by Mendocino Coast Television, our own public access television station. I'm going to have a really good time today. My guest today is Professor Norbert Wiley, better known as Nobby. And sir, you are a sociologist. Let's start there. What's a sociologist?
Well, a sociologist is somebody that tries to understand how society works and also how people work. There's a psychological side to it. So it is sort of, although not a measurement science, the way physics and chemistry are, more of a meaning science. And the topic I want to get to today is the problem of making an identity as an adult in the States and how this affects senior people.
Okay.
There's something about this particular decade that makes it of interest in this connection.
There's more of us all the time, for one thing. Is that, from a sociological perspective, are we really going through an unusual demographic time right now in terms of the number of people who are hitting 60? I guess the first bulge of that boomer edge hit last year. Mm-hmm.
There's always something demographic going on, right. But certainly the life expectancy and the psychological quality of life of old people, that's new, that old people are so young, right, in their spirit.
Healthy and lively.
That's new, yeah.
Right, yeah.
And it's a problem because, for one thing, it's expensive. They're not. Right. That's the big problem. They're not working, and so it's an expense.
Does that make sense for, when as we age into fairly robust good health and continued mental sharpness and emotional apparatus still well in place, does it stop making sense for us to stop working? Is that going to shift?
Yes and no. I certainly, and you can imagine ways in which a society could use everybody for their entire life practically, unless they're just completely sick in bed. Like you and I. Right. And I live in the woods, which is a senior community in Little River. And these people are almost all healthy, and they could be working. Right. But you have to organize economy, and it's very hard to do that, especially capitalism. They're very fussy, the people who run capitalism, about any government action whatsoever, very afraid of it. And obviously, you'd need a lot of interfering in the economy to make old people. You'd have to manage. It would be, you might not call it socialism, you could call it organizationalism or something, but it would be very organized. Right. It wouldn't be a market system. It would be something more complicated than that.
Are we, as we automate and digitize increasingly, we seem to be totally intent on taking manual labor of anything but very refined sort, sometimes even that, turning it over to thinking machines and robots. Are we looking forward to a world where there simply isn't going to be work for everybody? I'm just
that's come up a lot. There's a different way of looking at that every decade, and no, I don't think so. No. I think that, for one thing, to a great extent, work is exported to the third world, and they're working their heads off for long hours and pollution environments and so on. So it's really a handful of industrial countries that are in this situation, but they don't have to be. I don't.
So it's not so much that worldwide we're losing jobs, it's people who used to not have jobs or work subsistence on the land are now having jobs. So there's really there's more labor, way more labor available because of that rural to urban shift in the third world. Is that?
Well, the pay is cheaper, so of course there's a tremendous inducement to outsource labor any way it can be done if the profit is going to go up. Sure. And a profit-driven system has a lot of inefficiencies, and that's one of them. Okay. This mismatching of a lot of things that go on when the dollar is what's being pursued.
Got it. So let's go to this identity thing.
Okay.
So what is for you as a sociologist? How does identity emerge at all? What does that really mean?
Okay, well, we're born with certain characteristics that seem to be there with all human beings all the time. And I would say
The built-in stuff.
thinking and acting. We all think and we can all act. When the first human evolved from the chimps or whatever way we came about, then those properties were there that distinguish them from the primates. They're always there. But there are other things about human beings that are variable. What you value, what you believe, what skills you have. The identity is, here's the way I put it. I say that a human being has three levels. There's what I call the generic level, which is the thinking and the acting.
That's what we all have.
That's what we all have. Then at the other extreme, there's what I call a quotidian side to the self, meaning trivial, unimportant, ordinary, your habits in the kitchen, your mannerisms, those
all
things
those
are
little
minor.
funny things that make you you.
Yeah. Then in between are those huge chunks of meaning that make you the person that you are, or that individuate you, your identity.
Personality, identity?
Only part of it. Usually the way that when this is talked about, usually there's a distinction made between social identity and personal identity. Social identity is these tags that characterize you, your gender, your age, your ethnicity, your sexual orientation, and so on. Those are
Religious
tags that are the
ethnicity,
demographic traits. Then the personal identity is the qualities that you have, the things that you value, the characteristics that characterize you. I'm a little bit impulsive. I'm kind of smart. According to my wife, I'm kind.
Right. I have a high aesthetic sense. I like to look at art and stuff like that.
Yeah, there are a whole bunch of attributes that everybody has that carry personal identity.
And that's more personality as such.
I would say so.
Yeah.
Then on top of that, there's a kind of thing in you where you look at yourself, your opinion of yourself, your idea of yourself, your self-concept.
Self-reflective?
Yeah, self-reflective. You reflect that I was just talking about, the social and the personal
like I see
identity.
myself as a good, civic-minded person.
Yeah.
In that kind of self-reflection.
Yeah. And these identities differ from century to century, from culture to culture, and even across the extent.
So they're not arbitrary entirely.
They're not at all, no.
But at the same time, they're individualistic.
Your society throws a bunch of things at you. You internalize the culture of your society inevitably to a great extent, the laws, the language, and so on. And that's a portion of your identity, the part that's uniform for pretty much everybody.
For a whole culture.
And then,
so you could say all Americans have certain things that they tend to believe,
American style,
tend to value, and so on.
But then you add to that to characterize you, and these are things that at turning points in life, you tend to, adolescence is famous for a time when you experiment with this and that idea, this set of values and so on, and if it works out, you coalesce some toward the end, you coalesce.
So you kind of lock in on what gets positive response or what gets reinforced as you're going through
or what's
adolescence.
comfortable for you,
So this obviously, I mean, two things come to my mind immediately. Adolescence has been greatly extended. I mean, you know, we keep our kids adolescent until 25 or 27, or you know what I mean. That college now is kind of an extended adolescent, and everything is changing. I mean, everything is changing so rapidly. Does that make that process of individuation and the development of an identity a longer, complex project?
I think so. It's sort of going on all the time, much more. And as you say, you can say adolescence has been stretched well into the 20s with delayed marriage, college, unemployment, back home to your bedroom at mom. Those things are stretching it, sure, a great deal.
Do you think that? So how does this play out? Now we have elders. Let's say if you hit, you know, from 50 on, what you would traditionally have thought of as elders. Now that's that's kind of midlife. But so how is that going to change the experience of becoming an older person? I don't even know how to be. I mean, it's like I'm 70. I don't know how to be an older person. I never thought I was going to be. I kind of woke up in the last couple of years and went, oh my gosh, I am, but I don't know what that means to be an older person, really.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think anybody does. But I would make one comment about it. A characteristic of age has always been pointed out is you're going to die. You're approaching death.
Right.
Your body's
That gets closer,
Your
doesn't it?
body's winding down, and people have said for a long time that old age is an adjustment to the end of your life.
Right.
And I think that looked at it another way, because in my opinion, the self or the identity or the personality, which I'm going to call the soul, not in a religious sense, just a psychological sense.
Psyche, in the
soul,
traditional Greek sense of-
psyche,
yeah.
that never dies. When you get old and your body starts to move toward death, and when your body dies, your soul has to die, because that's the only way it can exist. It's attached to a body.
Right.
But it doesn't die in the sense that it too gets cancer or this or that. As a matter of fact, your personhood or your soul can remain young right to the moment of death.
Yeah.
Remember when my grandma was dying, right? I heard her death rattle, but at the same time she was shouting out orders. Her kids were middle-aged, and she was talking about where the money was going to go, where $10 to this and so on. You do this, and so she was screaming orders authoritatively right as she died.
As her
And I
last
thought,
breath was
you know,
made.
there's a big difference between a human being and body.
And the body.
Grandma didn't die. She just was
Yeah.
screaming and yelling right to the end.
Right.
That's the way I think old people are. They can. I'm doing this. My body is, I'm 80. My body is going down a little bit. You know, I'm going a little deaf and this and that.
Yeah.
But my soul isn't. On the contrary, my soul or my personhood is going up, in my opinion. I'm writing more. I'm writing better. I'm thinking better. So they're going in opposite directions. My
Yes.
body is starting to
Yes.
go down, and my self or mind or soul actually doing extremely well. So I decided, okay, the hell with the body. I don't care if it's going to die or not. I'll try to use common sense with it, but my life is my heart, my soul, my mind. That's what my life
Exactly.
is. It's not my body. And that's the way I think old people should think. And society is in a conspiracy to take your soul away from you. They're saying, well, you know, you're getting kind of old now, you shouldn't do this and so on.
It's kind of like if your skin is wrinkled, then your soul must be shrinking.
Very good analogy,
And
yeah.
I don't feel that way at all.
I don't think that the soul does diminish. I think that's a conspiracy that society does to make people feel that way about themselves. And if you hear it, and if it's in the air, it does tend to get internalized. They call it the looking-glass self. You believing what you see out there
Sure.
that's reflected toward you. But that's not necessary. This community I live in, the woods, these 130 houses with elderly people. You have to be over 55. It's full of people that are vibrant, that are very youthful, a lot of them are writing and painting and so on. It's a place where the soul is very strong. I can
Yes.
see it there.
Yes.
And it confirms what I've been thinking, that that's a lot of baloney, that the soul gets old. It never gets old.
You know, the other thing about it, I think, that's in me working at the senior center, which I just sort of fell into 3 years. I had always worked with basically teenagers with adolescents my whole life as a teacher, and as I designed communities for young people primarily. It was never around old people. I was around people in their late teens and early 20s, and came here, and then all of a sudden every day I was in community again, but in the company of people in their 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. And one of the things that was charming and obvious to me, not only was the lack of diminishment of the soul, but it was also that the soul expresses itself with a full range of variety, just like it does with young people. Young people aren't alike, neither are old people alike. We're as different as all the souls could be. And I think what you've just said really validates that.
Good. I want to mention another point that's kind of related. This is something from infancy, but it continues. A lot of kids, for one reason or another, they're hurt by someone in their family, they hide within themselves, and they develop what's called a false self in psychiatry. A false self is a person that's saying to them, I'm going to keep my real self hidden because I don't want to get hurt again.
Yeah,
I was
right.
hurt too much. I'm going to let this fake self out there, and if that gets clobbered, so what? That's not my real self. That defense mechanism goes on with a lot of people to
Later on through
degrees.
life?
That's what I think can happen. I think that
Yeah.
can go out. You have a duality throughout your life. You have this phony idea of your hidden self. Then you have this klutzy thing that you work with. You don't let it be what it is. You know,
Yeah.
it's you. It's supposed to be you. So you split. That can, of course, continue till old age. But one of the good jobs of old age is, one of the worthwhile things to do is to integrate yourself. That is to say, make some sense of the whole thing.
Your public self and your real self,
and everything you've
them come together more fully in the way you express them out in the world. Is that really the practice there?
Well, this is one of the things that people usually do. Try to make some kind of meaningful summation of everything that they've been, and become a kind of, that's getting a little close to the getting ready for death idea, which I don't like, but it is something that one does in old age. And
I have somebody who said memoir writing ought to be something that everybody starts at around 55 to 60. They ought to begin to take that longer look at themselves and integrate memoir writing, integrate the fullness of their experience into the liveliness of the now.
Yeah.
Interesting. I mean, I think I never thought about that as a practice for elders.
I think everybody should write their autobiography. I just mean for your grandchildren. Yeah. Just have this thing going, this tape recorder, and keep throwing stuff in. And don't even edit it, maybe. Just keep telling stories.
Yeah.
Not year by year, but story by story.
Right.
Everybody can do that.
As they loom important. Because different parts. It's interesting to me that on different months or different years, when I reminisce, there are different aspects of my history that begin to take on meaning in terms of something that's happening to me now. In other words, it happens sequentially, but it is often not sequential at all. It becomes significant because of something that happens in my life now.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about, my job is being the director of a senior center.
Where?
Right up here, just 6 blocks up the way here.
Okay.
Yeah.
I get it. Okay.
And so, we have a couple hundred people who come every day, and I have a good meal and sit around and keep company with one another. How this process of connecting individuation as the new elders, if you were going to design a senior center, what are some of the things you would, as a sociologist, how do you see that kind of an organization functioning in our society and in our culture?
I think performance is not a bad idea. Music, plays, reading things, acting, insofar as that can be done in a senior center, I think that's a good thing for people to do.
Just be consumers of culture, but to continue to engage in making culture, in making that happen.
I think so. I mean, it can be very simple, ordinary stuff, but that seems to be one of the outlets that's useful for that. But conversation is probably the material that should be used for this. That people talk a lot, talk to each other, and it's be set up for that to be something that can happen. Like the table where you eat set up so that it's easy to converse. That sort of simple design thing.
All ours are round, and they have 6 chairs at every one of them, and so you get that. I mean, the lunchroom is the dining room is the liveliest place in town. I think from 11:30 to 1 o'clock, 1:30, it's lively and popping. Every one of those tables is its own little organization in essence that you watch over. Now it's been 3 years, and it's quite astounding to see the difference in each of those tables and in the people and the things that get shared and so on.
Yeah. I have the impression that almost anybody can write. They might not write in perfect English, but they can tell stories.
Right. If you can talk in some sense, you can write.
And I think that old people should write about their life. They should write about their childhood, write about their parents, write about their Thanksgivings, the favorite room that they lived in, their Christmases.
Yeah.
And if possible, the traumas, the tough stuff, the things that went wrong in their life, if possible. My wife, Christine, had a writing group of elderly women, and they wrote about, one of her projects was to write about a room that meant a lot to you. It might be a bedroom. And this was a very useful thing for them to do, because it wasn't just writing about a bedroom, it was reviewing their life, reviewing out about the feelings that they had when they were growing up. Everybody should do that. They should be writing about things that are in their emotions.
Yep. You know, it's interesting. We just started the second round of this one's going to be either a 4 or 6 week writing workshop up at the center. 20 people showed up for the very first workshop, and they're just avid about it. And this is the second round, and it's interesting, just exactly what you're saying. It's growing in interest, and people are loving it.
Wonderful.
And I think that's why. I mean, I think it's such a powerful way to express yourself. Are you teaching anymore?
No, I'm
So
not.
you're writing now.
I write, yeah. I mean, I go to conferences and give talks. That's teaching in a way,
Sure.
but I'm not teaching. Nowadays, if you teach, the pay is so, you're an adjunct. This pay is so lousy, you're lucky if your gasoline is paid for.
Yeah, it's
and
true.
also, you're treated badly on university campuses unless you're one of the 20% that are regular faculty.
Major researchers. Or,
So I did at Santa Cruz, and it was horrible.
Really?
I thought it was just horrible. The pay was lousy. The students looked down on you because you're an adjunct. The administration treated you badly. It's part of the budget crisis, but I don't care what it's part of. I know it stinks.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't do it. I like teaching, but not that way.
we do seem to have lost a concept of an intellectual community that's vibrant, in which professors are, what would you say, they're the anchors, but the students and the graduate students form a powerful intellectual force. That doesn't really, I don't feel so much anymore on college campuses. I think a lot of college campuses probably is there in some, but.
Yeah, money's part of the problem. Part of it, though, is the publishing ethic that you have to keep writing at the top tier universities. So teaching is and a publisher parish is primary. Not that they're necessarily bad teachers, but most of their energy is going to go for publishing so they can make more money and be famous.
Well, if that's how you get security and money and reward and recognition, then obviously you're not 95% of your effort into the classroom. I started out as a philosophy professor, very quickly went, this isn't really where the action is. The action is, I love young people, but the action was not in the classroom as such, or at least not in that hierarchy of professorial pecking order, I don't think. Yep.
Yeah.
You still writing? Do you write every day?
Yes.
All the time? Yep. What are you working on now?
Well, I'm just finishing the book I mentioned earlier about Bowling Green State University and the we call it student uprising or something like that, how the quiet 50s became the political 60s. And that's what it's about, that campus, and how that's where it was born. The 60s were born.
Really, the great transition of our era was that one, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think so. And I'm writing another book now on...
Where were you then?
Where was I?
Yeah.
I was at that campus that had the demonstration.
Were you really? Oh,
yeah, I was on teaching sociology on that campus, and my two co-authors were also. It was such an year that nobody could write it up. It was too hard and too numbing of an experience. But eventually, we did.
Sure.
We did. It took a while. We did, yeah.
When you look back now from this perspective at that whole that whole event, or events of late 50s and clear through maybe the mid 70s or so, how does it feel differently now? I mean, when you look back at it, but you reflect on how you were feeling then, what happened?
Well, I think the main thing that happened was that we ended the Civil War. The Civil War was over slavery, and even though slavery is stopped, you get Jim Crow and a lot of de facto slavery. So that continues.
Segregation at its worst.
Yes. So the main thing that the 1960s did was to free the African Americans, to finish the job. Now, there were also other issues like Vietnam War, and poverty, and so on. But the thing that gave the most energy and the most resources to students was the race issue. Yeah.
And that was the one that, in a sense, I mean, not that there aren't continuing problems, but that really was a social transformation, where the Vietnam War did not turn out to be a transformation relative to nationalism and militarism. I mean, those things actually went on
There was much more
in a different context. Yeah. But race in America changed radically then.
Yep, and you could see how that drove this. In '63, I think, 1,000 college students went south for a voting drive thing.
Right,
and some of them, they were beat up and they're risking their lives and so on, but they did risk their lives for the racial equality. Then they go back to Berkeley, and Clark Kerr, who's running the place, they had a rule: no politics on campus.
Right.
No,
At Berkeley.
Just for student elections. You could have a student election, but you couldn't have real politics.
So when you think about Berkeley now, you go, my goodness.
So the students came from the South, all sweaty. They managed to live through a dangerous experience.
Yeah.
And Cal tells them, oh, no, you can't do that on campus. You can't have those tables.
Can't even talk about it.
Yeah, you can't. That's illegal. He really asked for it. And of course...
and it was ready to explode anyway, wasn't it? I mean,
sure.
That sense of
that
it all
issue?
being tucked in
Sure.
too tightly.
Well, there had been earlier stuff like the Bowling Green thing in Michigan had some earlier things, and the investigations in San Francisco in, I think it was 60, or it wasn't the students that were,
The
it wasn't their,
professors at that point
it wasn't
were-
their
yeah.
locus, it was the courthouse,
Yeah.
the city hall. However, students were the main energy. What happened, the HUAC asked for, there's a communist kid at Cal, Berkeley, and the kid's 17 years old or 18 or something, and they brought him in.
This is the House Un-American
Yeah,
Activities
yeah,
Committee.
Activities Committee. And so the students came to support their fellow student, but the room was full, so they had to be in the outer part of the building. And they're singing Battle Hymn of the Republic or something. I guess they were sheriff deputies, told them to shut up, and they were kind of muscling, maybe pressing the.
Yeah.
And one of the deputies lifted a fire hose. He said, "You want some of this?" And the student said, "Yes."
Yeah.
And so
Now,
the idiot
here's the part
hosed
now.
them down 15 stairs, and the cameras were right there. And the next
And that
day,
was the beginning
there
of
were
the uproar.
there were thousands of people out on the street. The union came out the next day, so that was an example of the students outsmarting the cops. That happened every time.
Yeah.
It was very hard for the police to catch up with what was going on.
Yeah.
Kind of like what's happening with the Occupy movement. There's always a new wrinkle.
Exactly.
And that kind of drove the 60s, that the cops kept making more mistakes. That was always the issue, police brutality.
Yeah. We're down to a minute, if you
Yeah.
can believe that. And I'm just going to ask you a single question and let you kind of take us out for a few seconds here. North Coast, the latter part of your life, vital, alive, and writing. If you were just going to pass some words on to all of us experienced elders, what would you tell us?
Well, it's really beautiful here, I must say. You guys are lucky. Between the ocean and the coast being so beautiful, the inland forest, the hills, this is such a beautiful, serene, wonderful place. I mean, in God's green earth, there's no place better than this. What I would say is take a good breath and a whole bunch more, and be happy that where you are. Enjoy it. It's a wonderful place to be.
It is, isn't it? Favorite place in the whole world.
Yeah, I'm very happy here. Well, I just moved from Oakland 3 months ago,
Yeah.
and that's the opposite extreme in stress. To have such a low-stress, serene place. I write a lot better. My marriage, which has always been good, is better. I'm here.
Professor Norbert Wiley, thank you so much for coming on Senior Perspectives. All you out there, thanks for plunging down into the mysteries of the Spirit with us today. You come back next time. Bye for now. Thank you.
That was fun.
That was fun.
Yeah.
I enjoyed that immensely. Yeah.
So you run the whole Age Center now?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll run into you again for some organization.
Charles Bush.
Bush. Oh, you're
Yeah, we do great dinners once a month. We do an evening sit-down, really elegant dinner as a fundraiser. So come watch the newspaper shows. That's a great time to come visit. A great food service crew and a wonderful chef, and we